You are imagining it wrong. When you picture a second American Civil War, you probably imagine two distinct armies marching into a field, flags waving, lines drawn clearly on a map between blue and red. You imagine a declaration, a moment where the switch flips. That is a fantasy. A modern civil war in a surveillance state with a fragmented supply chain doesn't look like Gettysburg. It looks like Syria. It looks like the Troubles in Northern Ireland, but scaled up to a continent. It doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a flicker. It starts when the police stop answering calls in certain neighbourhoods. It starts when the power grid fails, not because of a storm, but because of a rifle shot at a substation. It starts when you can't trust the GPS on your phone because the data is being spoofed by a rogue state governor. Today, we are walking through the 10 stages of escalation, from the first political riot to total balkanization. We aren't talking about storing beans. We are talking about surviving a timeline where your neighbours become combatants and your government becomes a question mark. Let's drop you into day zero. It's November. The election results have been stalled for 3 weeks. There are accusations of massive cyber intrusion in 3 swing states. You're sitting in a coffee shop in the suburbs of a state capital. The TV in the corner is showing a split screen, one network declaring a winner, the other showing live footage of a burning counting centre. Suddenly, your phone buzzes. It's not a text, it's a localised emergency alert. But the wording is strange. It doesn't tell you to evacuate. It tells you that the Federalised National Guard has been deemed an occupying force by your governor. Outside, a convoy of up-armoured police vehicles screams past. But they aren't marked with city logos. They're flying a militia flag zip-tied to the antenna. The barista drops a mug. It shatters. That sound is the last normal thing you're going to hear for a decade. The Wi-Fi cuts out. Not just the shop's router, but the cellular data. The signal bars vanish. You look out the window and see people running, not away from a fire, but toward the bank across the street, desperate to pull cash out of a machine that just died. Here is how 90% of the population dies or gets detained in this first 48 hours. They try to verify the truth. They freeze. When the data cuts and the conflicting orders come in, the average person's instinct is to go home, turn on the TV, and wait for the adults to fix it. They treat the outbreak of civil conflict like a blizzard. They stock up on milk and bread. They post angry status updates if the internet flickers back on. This is the fatal error. In a civil conflict, the adults are the ones shooting at each other. By staying in a contested zone, specifically near state capitals or major federal buildings, you are positioning yourself in the crossfire of the opening moves. While you are waiting for the news anchor to tell you it's okay, the highways are being barricaded by heavy equipment. While you are debating who is legally right on Twitter, the supply trucks have already stopped rolling. The people who die in Stage 1 aren't soldiers. They are civilians who insisted on normalcy while the rule of law was evaporating around them. Survival in the spark phase is entirely about mobility and information hygiene. You need to leave high-density political targets immediately, but you cannot look like you are fleeing. A car packed to the roof with supplies makes you a target for the panicked masses and the opportunistic gangs forming in the vacuum. You need a grey man vehicle loadout. Supplies go in the trunk, under the mats, inside the spare tyre well. The back seat remains empty. You look like a commuter, not a refugee. Second, you need a pre-downloaded offline map of your region that highlights choke points, bridges, tunnels, and interchanges. In a civil escalation, these are the first things to be seized or blocked. You need tertiary routes, back roads that don't appear on the main GPS algorithms. And finally, cash is king, but small bills are God. Nobody can break a $100 bill when the credit card readers are dead. If you don't have $500 in ones and fives, you aren't buying gas to get out of the hot zone. you're walking. But here is the twist, specific to a modern American conflict. The danger isn't just physical, it's digital targeting. In a civil war driven by polarization, your digital footprint is your uniform. If you are fleeing a blue city into a red rural area, or vice versa, your license plate and your phone's unique ID are broadcasting your origin. Checkpoints set up by local militias or breakaway police units won't just ask for ID, they will demand your phone. They will scroll your social media history. They will check your voter registration database, which was leaked months ago. If your digital history doesn't match the ideology of the guy holding the rifle, you are an enemy combatant. Before you move, you sanitize. You burner phone your life. You wipe the device, or better yet, you leave your primary smartphone at home and travel with a dumb phone. In 1861, you wore a grey or blue coat. In the 2020s, your coat is your search history. We are only at stage 1. We haven't even gotten to the drone swarms or the starvation sieges yet. If you are realizing right now that your plan for a societal collapse was just go to the woods, you are already a casualty statistic. You need to understand the structural anatomy of this disaster to survive it. If you want to survive the next 20 minutes of this breakdown, you need to lock in. Secure your spot in this briefing by hitting the subscribe button. We are going deep into the nightmare scenario, and I need you to be here for the rest of it. Fast forward 3 months. The lines have hardened. We enter stage 3, the infrastructure war. It's 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. You are asleep. The power has been flickering for weeks, but this time the cutoff is violent. A concussive boom rattles your windows. A transformer station 3 miles away has been hit by an IED. But it's not just the lights. Within 10 minutes, the water pressure in your taps drops to a dribble and then stops. The pumping stations run on electricity and the backups have been sabotaged. You go to the window. The city skyline isn't just dark, it's dead. No street lights, no ambient glow. Then you see the fires starting. Without electronic security systems, the looting begins instantly. But the scariest thing isn't the dark, it's the silence coming from the refrigerator. You have maybe 4 hours before your frozen stockpile starts to thaw. And you realise, with a sinking feeling, that this isn't an accident. This is a siege weapon. The other side isn't trying to invade your city, they are trying to dehydrate it. The common failure here is the wait it out mentality. People assume the utility company trucks are rolling. They assume FEMA is setting up water stations. They don't understand that the utility workers are on strike, or have been threatened with execution if they repair the grid powering enemy territory. Civilians drink their remaining water in the first day. They eat the salty canned soup because it's easy, accelerating their dehydration. They flush the toilet with their precious bathtub reserve, wasting gallons on sanitation when hydration is the only metric that matters. When the realisation hits that the water isn't coming back for months, panic sets in. But by then, you are already physically weak. You are headache-prone, lethargic, and making bad decisions. You venture out to find water, carrying empty jugs, making yourself a visible target for snipers who are watching the local ponds and fountains. To survive the infrastructure war, you have to decouple from the grid before it falls. This means the rule of 3 sources. You need 3 ways to get water that do not depend on a tap. 1. A collection system for rain. 2. A filtration system capable of handling biological and chemical contaminants. Not a Brita filter, I'm talking high-pressure ceramic filters. 3. A map of forgotten water. Industrial parks often have fire suppression tanks. Abandoned commercial buildings have water heaters full of 40 gallons of drinkable water. But the physics of this stage is about energy conservation. When the heat goes out in winter, or the AC fails in summer, your calorie burn skyrockets as your body fights to thermoregulate. You need to shrink your living space. You don't live in the whole house anymore. You live in one room. You insulate the windows with mattresses. You build a microclimate inside your home. This preserves your body heat and hides your light signature from the outside. The twist in a civil war scenario is that infrastructure attacks are rarely total. They are selective. This is weaponized inconvenience. The red faction might cut power to the blue urban centres while keeping the rural grid active to power their logistics. Or the blue cyber warfare units might brick the tractors and trucks of the agricultural belt. You might find yourself in a grey zone where you have power for 2 hours a day at unpredictable times. This is psychological torture. It forces you to stay glued to your appliances, waiting for the juice to charge your batteries. If you rely on that intermittent power, you are tethered. The survivors will be the ones who go full analogue. They treat the intermittent power as a luxury, not a lifeline. They don't wait for the grid. They assume the grid is enemy territory. If the lights come on, they tape over the windows so the neighbours don't know they have power. Because in a blackout, a lit window is a beacon for a Molotov cocktail. We are 6 months in, stage 5. This is where the uniforms stop meaning safety. You are driving down a state highway, trying to get to a relative's farm. You see a roadblock ahead. It's manned by men in camouflage with military-grade rifles. They have a Humvee. They look like the National Guard. You feel a wave of relief. You slow down, roll down your window, and prepare to show your ID. As you get closer, you notice something off. They're patches. Some are wearing the state flag. Others have put Velcro patches of a specific political militia over their unit insignias. The soldier approaching you isn't asking for your license. He's asking for your travel authorization, issued by the Provisional State Council, an entity that didn't exist 4 months ago. Behind him, you see a federal FBI SUV in a ditch, riddled with bullet holes. You realise too late, this unit has defected. They aren't enforcing US law, they are enforcing the law of the local warlord governor. And you are holding a passport from the wrong side of the line. The deadly mistake here is appeal to authority. We are conditioned to believe that if we follow the rules and speak respectfully to an officer, we will be fine. In a fragmented security state, there is no single authority. The rules change every 10 miles. If you try to quote the Constitution to a sheriff who has just declared his county a sovereign sanctuary, you are not making a legal argument. You are identifying yourself as a threat. Civilians get killed in this stage because they hesitate. They see a roadblock and they stop, assuming it's legitimate. Or they see a raid happening next door and they call 911, not realising the dispatch centre is now controlled by the same faction conducting the raid. The police, the military, the feds, they are now rival gangs with better equipment. Trusting the uniform gets you detained, your supplies seized, and your vehicle commandeered for the war effort. Navigating a fractured security landscape requires visual agnosticism. You need to look like you belong nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Your vehicle should have no political stickers, no patriotic flags, no university decals, nothing. It should be a ghost. Inside the car, you need a document cache. This is dangerous but necessary. You might need fake papers or valid papers for multiple jurisdictions. If you are entering a separatist zone, you show the ID that lists a local address. If you are stopped by federal loyalists, you show your federal ID. You are playing a shell game with your identity. Furthermore, you need to learn the OODA loop of checkpoints. Observe from a distance. Orient yourself to who is running it. Look at boots, weapons, and discipline. Are they smoking and laughing? Probably militia. Are they standing rigid? Probably regulars. Decide if you can turn around without being shot. Act immediately. Never drive into a checkpoint blind. If you see brake lights a mile ahead, you get off the road immediately. The twist is the blue-on-blue chaos. In a civil war, identifying friend from foe is a nightmare even for the combatants. You might get caught in a firefight between two units that look exactly the same. Same camo, same AR-15s, same helmets. The only difference is a strip of coloured tape on their arm or a specific radio frequency. As a civilian, this is terrifying because there is no safe zone. You might think you are in loyalist territory, but a sleeper cell within the local National Guard unit decides tonight is the night to flip. The barracks explode. The streets turn into a war zone instantly. The danger is perfidy, combatants dressing as civilians or opposing forces to conduct attacks. This means that nobody trusts you. If you approach a soldier for help, they will likely treat you as a suicide bomber first and a refugee second. Keep your hands visible, move slowly, and never, ever approach a military convoy on foot. Year 2. The front lines have stalled. The war has shifted from moving armies to open insurgency. Stage 7. You are walking through what used to be a safe suburb. It's quiet. Too quiet. Then you hear it. A high-pitched mosquito whine. It's not a bird. It's a commercial quadcopter drone, modified in a garage 3 blocks away. It's hovering 20 feet above the street, its camera scanning for heat signatures. You freeze under an awning. Suddenly, the drone dives. It drops a 3D printed payload casing filled with explosives onto a passing fuel truck. The explosion knocks you off your feet. This is the new reality. There are no safe rear areas. Every neighbourhood is a potential front line. The enemy isn't a soldier you can see, it's a teenager with a VR headset controlling a swarm of suicide drones from a basement 5 miles away. The sky has become an eye that wants to kill you. People die here because they don't look up. They build walls, they board up windows, they sandbag their porches. They think in 2 dimensions, but the threat is 3-dimensional. A 6-foot wall is useless against a drone that can fly over it and drop a grenade in your lap while you're cooking dinner in the courtyard. Another failure is relying on cover instead of concealment. You hide behind a car thinking you are safe. But the drone has a thermal camera. It sees your body heat glowing bright white against the cold metal of the car. It knows exactly where you are. It loiters, waiting for you to move. Panic fire is also a death sentence. People try to shoot the drones down with shotguns. All this does is reveal your position to the operator, who then marks your house for a mortar strike or a follow-up raid. You cannot fight the swarm with buckshot. Surviving the drone war requires defeating the sensors. You need to understand thermal camouflage. Regular camo netting is useless if you glow like a light bulb in the infrared spectrum. You need mylar space blankets, not to wrap around yourself, but to suspend above your position. The air gap between the mylar and your body disperses the heat. You need to break up your thermal outline. Walking under thick tree canopies is better than open streets. Moving during the thermal crossover times of day, dawn and dusk, when the ambient temperature of the ground matches your body temperature, makes you harder to spot. Inside your home, you need overhead cover. You hang heavy wool blankets or carpets horizontally from the ceiling. This acts as a blast catcher for small drone munitions penetrating the roof, and also blocks the thermal signature from looking down. You essentially build a fort inside your living room. And you listen. Your ears become your primary radar. That buzzing sound is the Reaper. The twist here is the double tap. Insurgents know that when a bomb goes off, first responders and neighbours rush in to help. So they send a second drone, or they plant a secondary IED, timed to detonate 10 minutes later. In a civil war insurgency, altruism is weaponized. If you see an explosion down the street, your instinct screams at you to run and help. You must suppress that instinct. You wait. You watch. You scan the rooftops and the sky. If you rush into the kill zone, you become part of the body count. Additionally, the drones aren't just for killing, they are for psychological warfare. They might fly over your house at night, playing recordings of screaming or political propaganda at full volume, denying you sleep, driving you to the brink of insanity so you make a mistake. They want you tired. They want you reckless. Don't give them the satisfaction. Year 4. The United States exists only on old maps. We are in Stage 9, the breakup. You are living in a region now controlled by a Regional Defense Council. It's a fancy name for a warlord. You need antibiotics for an infection. You go to the local market, which is set up in a gutted football stadium. You don't use dollars. Dollars are toilet paper. You use silver, ammunition, or labour vouchers. But before you can trade, a truck pulls up. It's the local boss's men. They aren't enforcing laws, they are collecting protection tax. They take 30% of the food on the tables. A merchant argues. He is beaten in front of everyone. Nobody intervenes. The police are gone. The courts are gone. There is only the guy with the most guns and the guys who feed him. You realise that your survival isn't about being right or being hidden anymore. It's about being useful to the monster in charge, or being invisible enough that he forgets you exist. The failure in the warlord stage is lone wolf syndrome. People think they can hole up in a bunker, shoot anyone who comes near, and ride it out. In a warlord scenario, a lone wolf is just a loot drop. If you have a stockpile and no friends, the local warlord will simply burn you out. He has more men, more time, and heavy machinery. He will park a bulldozer on your bunker entrance and wait. Survival now is social. It is feudal. You have to form a community, a tribe, that is large enough to be a prickly target, but small enough to feed. The other failure is moral rigidity. You will see things that violate every ethical code you were raised with. Slavery, summary executions, extortion. If you try to be the hero in every situation, you die. This is the hardest pill to swallow. You have to make calculated compromises to keep your family alive in a world devoid of justice. Logistics in the breakup are about soft power and skills. Bullets run out. Gold draws attention. But skills are renewable. Can you repair a radio? Can you stitch a wound? Can you distill alcohol? Can you grow food? These are the currencies that keep you alive without making you a target for robbery. If you are the town mechanic, the warlord has a vested interest in keeping you alive. You become a protected asset. You need to build a skill monopoly in your immediate area. Also, you need to understand the new geography. Borders are no longer state lines. They are ridge lines, rivers, and destroyed bridges. You need to know exactly where the warlord's influence ends and the no man's land begins. The no man's land is dangerous, but it's the only place you can travel without paying a tax. You map the anarchic corridors. You learn to smuggle. You become a conduit for things people need, and that makes you valuable. The twist is the return of medieval problems. With the collapse of central authority comes the collapse of epidemiological control. Cholera, dysentery, measles. Things we defeated a century ago return with a vengeance because the sanitation plants have been offline for years and nobody is vaccinated anymore. The warlord might have guns, but he can't shoot a bacteria. You might survive the death squads, only to die from a scratched leg that goes septic. Your most valuable weapon in Stage 9 isn't a rifle, it's a stash of broad-spectrum antibiotics and the knowledge of how to manage waste. You have to be ruthlessly clean in a filthy world. You have to quarantine new arrivals. You have to act as your own CDC. The warlords will fall eventually. usually assassinated by their own lieutenants. But the diseases they allowed to fester will kill people for a generation. Year 10. The fighting has largely stopped. Not because anyone won, but because everyone is exhausted. The ammunition has run dry. The fuel is gone. You are sitting on your porch. You look 10 years older than you are. A convoy of white UN trucks rolls slowly down the cracked asphalt of the highway. They are handing out rice and satellite phones. A provisional treaty has been signed. The country is split. You are now a citizen of the Pacific States of America, or the Free Republic of the Gulf. You have a new passport. The borders are hard, razor wire and minefields where the interstate used to be. You survived. But you look around. Half the houses on your block are empty ruins. The power works for 6 hours a day. The internet is a censored, local intranet. You aren't free, but you are alive. The war is over, but the peace is cold, bitter, and armed to the teeth. The final failure is believing that post-war means back to normal. It never goes back. The economy you knew is gone. Your pension is gone. The stock market is a memory. People who expect a return to the 2020 standard of living will fall into deep despair or radicalize again. The danger in the settlement phase is the purge. When the new governments solidify control, they hunt down the collaborators of the losing side. If you were too friendly with the wrong militia during the war, the new police force comes knocking at night. Peace treaties are signed by generals, but they are enforced by vengeful neighbours. The survivor knows that the end of the war is just the beginning of the reckoning. You keep your head down. You don't brag about what you did to survive. You bury your guns, but you don't destroy them. You assimilate into the new grey reality. Surviving the peace requires reintegration. You need to legitimize yourself in the new system without exposing your secrets. This means getting the new ID papers immediately. It means registering for the new rationing cards. You play the role of the tired, compliant citizen. But logistically, you are looking at a scavenger economy. The global supply chain is shattered. You aren't buying new clothes, you are mending. You aren't buying new tech, you are soldering old circuit boards. The most valuable assets in the settlement phase are seeds, tools, and raw materials. The person who can build a solar array from scrap is the new millionaire. You shift your mindset from defense to production. You start growing not just for yourself, but for the market. You rebuild trust slowly, but you verify everything. You teach your children that the peace is fragile, and that the map on the wall is written in pencil, not ink. And here is the final twist. The war didn't just change the borders, it changed you. You look at a grocery store shelf in a movie, and it looks like a fantasy. You hear a loud noise, and your heart stops. You are part of a trauma generation. The twist is that the conflict moves from the battlefield to the mind. The United States of America was an idea, and ideas can die. The physical land is still there, but the shared hallucination that we are all on the same team is gone. You are now living in a world of us and them that is permanent. You survived the shooting, but can you survive the hatred? The real survival curriculum wasn't about the water filters or the ammo. It was about keeping your humanity intact when the world wanted to turn you into an animal. That is the hardest prep of all. This timeline isn't a prediction, it's a warning. The cracks are already in the pavement. You've seen the polarization, you've felt the anger. The slide from stage 1 to stage 10 can happen faster than you think. But here is the thing. Knowing the roadmap is the only way to change the destination. We have covered the Civil War scenario, but what happens when the trigger isn't political, but planetary? What happens when the grid goes down not because of a militia, but because of a solar flare that fries every circuit on Earth instantly. That is a completely different set of rules, and a completely different kind of darkness. If you want to know if your Faraday cage will actually work, or if it's just a metal coffin, you need to click this video right here. The sun is waking up, and we aren't ready. You survived the simulation. Now survive the reality. Equip yourself at the official supply depot. Because if the world is going to end, you might as well look prepared.